Part 26. Looking for the Lost Ship Girl. Author, Hai De Rong Yan. Chapter 251. When Akage said that the enemy was very weak, Sugu breathed a sigh of relief, because after all, this was not a game, and he was still worried that his ship girl would be in danger. Although I always hear people say that it is their fate that the ship girl sinks, but whether it is fate or something else, Sugu still hopes that everyone can live happily. Akage released the carrier-based aircraft to conduct reconnaissance on the sea. It took a lot of time for the carrier-based aircraft to return. In the end, the answer was that the only threats were large ships like a dozen deep-sea battleships. As long as they were not all gathered together, there was no need to worry about such a number. This is not to say that you are blindly confident. If you cannot destroy even this enemy, then you are too unconfident. Akage and Sugu didn't care much, but Chibolin was a little surprised. Aren't more than a dozen deep-sea ships strong enough? Hey, I'm talking about you. Zeppelin said this, but was suddenly interrupted by a voice in the middle of his sentence. Admiral. Lexington came from afar, trotting with a little trot, stroking her hair as she went, followed by Saratoga. Sugu had already guessed that Saratoga and Lexington had told each other what happened to them, so he waved to Lexington, "It's okay, it's okay. Akage has already used carrier-based aircraft to investigate, that is, a little bit of an enemy." So just like that, Sugu told Lexington the news about Akage's investigation. Then the other side also breathed a sigh of relief. If this is the case, then there is no need to worry. She glanced at her sister Saratoga with some reproach, and suddenly ran to her side and talked a lot, thinking that she would encounter a strong enemy. Listening on the side, Zeppelin was a little unhappy. Although he knew that the people in Akage were very strong, it was not that easy when it came to actual combat, so he needed to be careful. She wanted to speak and give a few words as an instructor, but Akage held her shoulders immediately. Akage shook his head and said, "It's okay." But the voice paused midway. Zeppelin thought for a while, even deep-sea ships have strengths and weaknesses, so they are probably some weak deep-sea ship girls. She believed in her senior Akage. "It's okay," Auntie Xiao Zai said the same thing, but she was immediately patted on the face by Zeppelin, although the hand was very gentle. Sugu gathered a group of people together. In fact, it has attracted a lot of people now. After all, there was a sudden heavy rain that only occurs in summer. Everyone was a little strange, and then they saw a group of people gathering in the corridor. Soon after Bismarck came with Prince Eugen. Then there was the Prince of Wales, standing next to her still holding a glass of wine, looking like she was a drunkard. Next to her is Counterattack with Fletcher. In this way, more and more people gathered. Sugu told what he knew, and then everyone started talking. Finally, he came to the conclusion that there was no need to worry about the enemy's strength, except that the number seemed to be a bit large. Sugu's proposal was to divide the enemies and then eliminate them one by one. Lexington said, "This is the garrison we built, the home we built. Here are our precious memories. Although we may encounter danger, we don't want any harm here. Let's just eliminate them all." "Okay, there's no need to go to so much trouble and divide, Admiral. I know you are worried about us, but please also trust us." Lexington had reached this point, and Sugu said, "Well, that's fine. But there are so many enemies, you want to be able to breathe." Sugu lost his opinion, but Chibolin wanted to say something at this time. "It's just that although she is nominally the instructor of the guardhouse, she has never had any prestige at all." At this time, Bismarck also patted her shoulder, indicating that she did not need to worry, but the Prince of Wales glanced at her and ignored her at all. Saratoga took Sugu's hand and said, "Brother-in-law, there are many deep-sea ship girls." Deep-sea ship girl? What exactly do you want to say?" I also want to attack. The garrison has always had to face some weak deep-sea destroyers. Facing such an enemy, there is no chance for Saratoga to attack. Sugu said, then you go. The resources can be reimbursed by the ship girl's attack. Of course, if it's just a deep-sea destroyer, it won't work if you dispatch a battleship. It's different now. With so many enemies, anyone can attack. Moreover, in the past, York City was asked to attack for the sake of experience, but this situation was not something York City could handle, so of course Saratoga had to attack. Saratoga said, that's not what I meant. There are many deep-sea ship girls, so many, I mean, the person who sinks the deep-sea ship girls and gets the most results can win the MVP. If there are too few enemies, MVP is meaningless. If there are enough enemies, it can reflect who has stronger combat effectiveness. Saratoga blinked with big eyes and said, if there is a reward for winning the MVP, other people's garrison is like that. There is a reward for winning the MVP. Sugu is a very open-minded person and said, that's okay, there is a reward, what do you want? I haven't thought about it yet. Anyway, my brother-in-law promised me that if I win the MVP, I will be rewarded, and I am not allowed to go back on my word. Although he could guess what his sister-in-law was thinking, he didn't care much. Sugu thought about it and said, okay, okay. The Prince of Wales drank the red wine in his hand, and then wanted to walk away, saying, it depends on who the admiral wants to attack, whoever attacks will win the MVP, and, does the admiral think we are kindergarten children? MVP, just like the big red flower, whoever wants that thing can want it. Sugu said, don't say that, Prince of Wales. The MVP is not a big red flower, it is a trophy and a medal. As for who takes action, it is rare to have such an opportunity. Whoever wants to take action can do it. No matter who wins the MVP, anyway, you can make a request to me, and I will agree to it no matter what it is. Of course, if you want the moon, I will definitely not give it to you. Okay, that's it. The Prince of Wales raised his hand, looked at Bismarck with some provocation, and said, be prepared for counterattack. Call Firefly and Amethyst over here. She countered by mentioning the hem of her maid uniform, bowed slightly, and said, okay, where are Exeter, Javelin, and Queen? We called Firefly and Amethyst because we were worried about anti-submarine issues. As for everything else, it's not a problem. The Prince of Wales walked away with a counterattack, and Zeppelin looked at the opponent's back. The Prince of Wales did know him, but their relationship only stopped at meeting and saying hello, and they would never chat. As for the counterattack, although they seemed to be easy to get along with, there was still no interaction, mainly because the other party's cooking skills were too impressive. British ships are all difficult guys to get along with. The Prince of Wales walked away, and Bismarck frowned. She said to Prince Eugen beside her, call the North House, and U-47 and the others. I thought about it, U-47 and the others should just forget it, there is no need. Get on them. Submarines are very effective against large ships, but because the submarine's armor is so thin, if it is discovered, it will be difficult to withstand attacks from torpedo planes and deep drop bombs. Unlike a battleship like itself, few enemies can penetrate the armor. Xiaozai followed Bismarck. He originally wanted to say that he was going to, but heard behind him. If Bizai goes, then I won't go because I don't want to be in the same fleet with her. Lazy house, fat house, dead house, fat house. Saratoga grabbed Fletcher, who wanted to follow the counterattack, and said, why are you following them? Fletcher was grabbed, and only then did he think of his position. Saratoga said, also, sister, you have everything anyway, you have to help me. Akaga smiled at Zeppelin and said, don't worry. York City finally came over and said, I'm going too. Sugu said, you can't go, you're too weak. York City was really afraid of being in danger when going out, and her carrier-based aircraft were really not of much use. York City glared at Sugu, but Sugu's expression did not change. In the end, he could only say angrily, "If you don't go, I won't go." Although she couldn't attack, she rolled her eyes, took Zeppelin's hand, and said, "Instructor Zeppelin, Sister Zeppelin, let's go watch the battle." She still wanted to see it and listen to Zeppelin's explanation of the battlefield, which was very useful. Everyone dispersed. Lexington was still by Sugu's side. Sugu said, "The name of the battle, Absolute Defensive Circle, no, since we take the initiative, let's call it Fenglay." "Why is it called this name?" "Very handsome." Looking for the Lost Ship Girl. Author, Hai De Rong Yan. Chapter 252. The heavy rain fell, and the strong wind blew up the waves. Those huge waves were enough to overturn many ships that were not big enough, but for the ship girl, they were just a little bumpy. In fact, the deep-sea ship girls may not necessarily go to the garrison, but as a ship girl, suppressing the deep-sea ship girls is their mission. For everyone, we don't want to place our hopes on the deep-sea ship girls, and we don't want the garrison we built together to be harmed by artillery fire. Since we are going to attack, if possible, we must of course place the battlefield as far away from the garrison as possible. On the vast sea, Firefly, Amethyst, and Fletcher stood at the front of the team. As frigates, the first thing they had to do was anti-submarine warfare. Although to a certain extent, everyone is divided into several small circles, no one would joke about such a thing. For battleships and aircraft carriers, the threat of submarines is still relatively large. It was past afternoon to evening, and the sky was gloomy because of the rain. Just seeing it gave people a sense of oppression. Lightning appeared from time to time. This was the unparalleled power displayed by nature. Dense rain and bumpy waves. If an ordinary person could see things in their field of vision under such circumstances, they would probably become dizzy from the bumps. However, for ship girls, rain and big waves cannot reduce their field of vision. Standing on the sea at this time, you can already see the deep-sea ship girls one by one. They stand there without restraining their strength. To the ship girls, they are like black spots on a piece of white paper. It's a big tree standing abruptly on a grassland. Saratoga, Lexington, and Akaga stood together, but Saratoga was close enough to her sister that she could wrap her arms around her waist, while Akaga was a little further away. For Akaga, he is alone to a certain extent. The relationship between everyone may not be that good, but they still have to start the attack together. The Prince of Wales stood at the far left of the line with the counter-attack. As both a companion and an opponent, Bismarck brought his sister and Prince Eugen to the stage. Although her sister still looks weak, when it comes time to attack, she will still attack honestly and attack honestly. Zeppelin and York City stood far away from the battlefield. Unlike Sugu, it was still inappropriate for Sugu to stay outside as an ordinary person. Perhaps just one missed carrier-based aircraft could kill him. However, as Zeppelin and Yorktown are shipmates, they are still not easily injured by attacks from some carrier-based aircraft. Sugu could only stay in the office and wait for news of victory, but Zeppelin and York City were able to stand outside the battlefield. At this time, York City said, "I have been on attack, but I have never encountered such a situation. When I saw those deep-sea ship girls, they were always attacking villages or wandering around. What should we do in this confrontation-like scene? What to do? Don't think about so many things. Although they say that the deep-sea flagship is intelligent, do you want to communicate? What else can we do? The first thing you have to do is to fly the aircraft. The first step is of course to ensure that the carrier-based aircraft searches for the enemy. The side that attacks first has the advantage." Zeppelin did not join the battlefield. Although the enemy looked terrifying, she still believed in the firm looks Akagi and Bismarck gave her. At this time, she said to her student York City, Searching for enemies, aviation warfare, air control, opening bombing, and torpedoes. Air control depends on the strength of your carrier-based aircraft, as well as your personal control ability and the ability to launch the ship at once. The number of carrier-based aircraft. The strength of the carrier-based aircraft is confirmed from the beginning. The control ability depends on the individual's proficiency, and the number of flights. The number of aircraft released, as a ship girl, is still somewhat different from those of real warships. When we release aircraft, we mainly look at the ship's equipment parameters, which also means firepower. Firepower is just data, and there is no way to measure it properly, but as an individual, I understand. The higher the firepower, the more carrier-based aircraft will be released. York City said, I can only fly 3 aircraft at a time. How many carrier-based aircraft can they fly? For the opening, come one at a time and release slowly, usually 4 times. Due to some special circumstances, my firepower is about 20 points. I can fly 7 at a time. What they say. Before Zeppelin finished speaking, York City had already said loudly, I saw it. I saw Sister Akagi, Sister Lexington, and Saratoga. They flew 11 at a time. There was heavy rain and strong wind, and lightning struck down, like a silver snake dancing wildly in the air. Zeppelin took a breath and shouted loudly, I know, you don't need to tell me, just because Akagi can fly 11 carrier-based aircraft at a time, that's why I call her Akagi-senpai. As Zeppelin said, Lexington, Saratoga and Akagi have already deployed their ships. In fact, the deep-sea ship girls have also discovered the enemy here. The two sides are facing each other, and they can feel their eyes meeting. If the beast-like deep-sea destroyer has sailed this way, the deep-sea aircraft carrier with certain intelligence will begin to take off. Because of the enemy's search, Lexington and others, who had the advantage of searching for the enemy, had already made preparations. Carrier-based aircraft flew across the flight decks of the Lexington and Saratoga ships one after another. Golden or purple carrier-based aircraft flew across the flight decks and then took off. Beside them, a head of long, satin-like black hair was blown up by the sea breeze and danced wildly. Akagi set up his bow and shot an arrow, and the arrow flew into the sky and turned into a carrier-based aircraft. The spiral sound made a clicking sound, the fuselage shook and then flew firmly into the sky. Lexington's skill in the game is called Aviation Tactical Herald, and the carrier-based aircraft of all the ship girls around her can be improved. In reality, there is no such thing as skills. Correspondingly, her skills are expressed as excellent command abilities. For an aircraft carrier, each carrier-based aircraft is like its own clone. The more powerful it is, the more carrier-based aircraft it can control at the same time. At this time Lexington stood there, countless scenes fed back from the carrier-based aircraft appeared in his mind. The enemy is looking over. Bismarck and the Prince of Wales, don't even think about attacking. Now is our time. Gia, Akagi, pay attention to occupying the air. Here they come. What they mean is the carrier-based aircraft of the deep-sea aircraft carrier. At this time, those carrier-based aircraft have already taken off. Those black carrier-based aircraft are flying in the sky like a large group of petrels and like a dark cloud. Gia, Akagi, all carrier-based aircraft raise their altitude. First of all, ensure the control of all fighter jets. When they come, dive, jump down, and shoot them all down. Then the golden clouds collided with the whole dark cloud. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Looking for the Lost Ship Girl. Author, Hai De Rong Yan. Chapter 253. Bizai looked at the carrier-based aircraft in the sky and said, I hate carrier-based aircraft and I hate airplanes. Bismarck said, Bizai, don't talk. Bizai sighed and said, I just hate it. She looked bored, brushing her hair and rubbing her eyes. Prince Eugen looked at Bazai and said, I always feel that if I am Bazai's opponent, seeing her weak look, I feel that it is very meaningless to defeat such an opponent. At that time, my movements must be slower. Above the sea, Bazai was talking, and the battle in the sky was beginning. For a ship girl, a carrier-based aircraft is like an arm. Any carrier-based aircraft is an extension of the body, just like a person has 10 fingers. The ship girls on both sides were still far away. The carrier-based aircraft of the aircraft carrier were the first to take off. The main business was to occupy air superiority and restrict the enemy's bombers and torpedo planes. At this time, the golden carrier-based aircraft and the black carrier-based aircraft collided together, the golden clouds and the dark clouds merged together, and each fighter jet locked onto an enemy. Naturally, such a battle will not be resolved in one face-to-face like the game. It takes a certain amount of time for the fighters to attack each other to determine the outcome. If we talk about a ship girl who is not good at controlling carrier-based aircraft, it is like a frame in the game that surrounds all the carrier-based aircraft. For powerful ship girls, each carrier-based aircraft is an independent unit. Saratoga has a high level of manipulation, but she doesn't like fighting very much. However, if she wants to be MVP, she can only fight. At this time, she focused her energy on the fighter jets, keeping her sights fixed on an enemy carrier-based aircraft while controlling the altitude of several fighter jets. It is said that the performance of carrier-based aircraft affects air supremacy, but excellent maneuverability can bring carrier-based aircraft one step closer to air supremacy. The propellers rotated, and enemy and friendly carrier-based aircraft crossed each other. Saratoga maneuvered the fighter jet in a series of movements, including sharp turns, pursuit, high-power maneuvers, and barrel rolls. Then the fighter jet appeared behind a black carrier-based aircraft. The machine gun sprayed flames, and then the bullets hit the enemy's wings and tail, and the flames rose on the enemy's carrier-based aircraft. The black carrier-based aircraft fell from the sky to the sea. Saratoga turned her attention away from the perspective of the carrier-based aircraft and said, I destroyed one. Saratoga was happy, and Lexington said, Gaga, don't talk nonsense, more enemies are coming. Carrier-based aircraft and carrier-based aircraft collide together. As a battleship, it is just a layman's way of watching, but as an aircraft carrier, it is an expert's way of watching. As an instructor, Zeppelin faced York City as a student. At this time, she said, it is never easy to gain air superiority. In most cases, it is good to have air superiority. Akaga's fighter jets are Sea Fangs, and Lexington's fighter jets are Hero aircraft. York City, please pay attention, why don't you go to the battlefield? Firstly, you are inexperienced, and secondly, you can only see many things clearly as a bystander. You learn. At this time, Zeppelin was watching the carrier-based aircraft flying in the air, and she knew the flying movements of each carrier-based aircraft. Separation. Vertical steering. Mongoose. Sometimes some actions are not clear. At this time, I asked doubtfully, what should this action be called? It seems very effective. The battle in the air continued for a while, and then the deep-sea ship's carrier-based planes were on fire and fell like raindrops. The heavy rain continued to fall, and soon only a small number of black carrier-based aircraft could be seen in the sky. York City said, the fight is over so quickly, doesn't it mean it will take a long time? Zeppelin was also a little surprised. Generally speaking, when playing against deep-sea ship girls, it is rare to confirm air superiority in such a short period of time. At this time, hearing York City's words, she said, I saw it. Looking at all this, Zeppelin thought for a while and said, the role of aircraft carriers is not actually to kill enemies. They are more often responsible for the task of air control. This is also the case. You see, what happens next? Fighters ensure air superiority, and then comes the world of bombers. I saw carrier-based aircraft flying in the sky, with patrols surrounding the deep-sea ship. Bismarck and the Prince of Wales stood still, but the enemy deep-sea ship girls would not do this. They would charge when they saw the enemy. At this time, the deep-sea destroyers and light cruisers had already sailed towards Lexington and the others, with Bismarck and the Prince of Wales standing in front of Lexington and the others. However, what faced the deep-sea ship girl at this time was not the gunfire of the battleship, but bombers diving down from the sky. Each ship has air defense capabilities. As destroyers and light cruisers, they originally existed as frigates. Facing the carrier-based aircraft swooping down below, relying on instinct, the deep-sea ship girl controlled the machine gun on the ship to spray bullets at the carrier-based aircraft. Saratoga is controlling the carrier-based aircraft to fly towards the deep-sea ship girls. The carrier-based aircraft rotates along the enemy at super high speed, goes around behind the enemy, and wants to drop bombs. The next second, a carrier-based aircraft passed by and dropped a bomb before her. A deep-sea destroyer sank, but the victory was not his own. Saratoga glared at Akagi. "That's my goal." Akagi smiled sweetly and said, "Now it's my victory, first come first served." "You vixen." "MVP, I also want the Admiral's promise. And if you say I'm a vixen, then just be a vixen." "I'll be a vixen from now on." "It's agreed." "You." Lexington said from the side, "Gaga, don't worry about which one, there are more enemies ahead." At this time, if you zoom in on the entire sea to the sky, the deep-sea destroyers and deep-sea light cruisers sailing at the front at high speed are releasing artillery fire and torpedoes as they sail. At this time, carrier-based aircraft flew over, and after a while, the deep-sea ship girls burst into flames. Yorktown said, "Sister Lexington told me before that the future is the era of aircraft carriers, and what restricts the combat effectiveness of aircraft carriers is carrier-based aircraft." The former carrier-based raiders in the garrison had B-25s and A-2s. If it were her, there is no need for battleships at all, it can kill the enemy thousands of miles away. Instructor Zeppelin, do you think this is true? Zeppelin's face was as dark as water. In his field of vision, the deep-sea destroyers and light cruisers sailing at the front had fallen into a large area like cutting wheat. After this round of carrier-based aircraft attacks, the number of enemies was much reduced. At this time, she thought of a word: wash the floor. York City added, "Instructor Zeppelin, you didn't say that the role of the aircraft carrier is to control the air, but..." Zeppelin remembered what she had just said. She looked at York City and said, "Why do you talk so much? Since your Lexington sister told you, don't ask me." Zeppelin was angry, and on the other side, the Prince of Wales said, "Amethyst, have you discovered the enemy's submarine?" "No." "Firefly, Amethyst, pay attention to anti-submarine, counterattack, follow me." Some distance away from the Prince of Wales, Bismarck was saying, "North House." Bayseye patted her face, trying to cheer up, but when she failed, she responded, "Oh." Hearing his sister's feeble voice, Bismarck growled, "Turpits." Bayseye's face turned serious and he said, "Yes, sister. Every carrier-based aircraft has ammunition and fuel limits. At this time, the carrier-based aircraft has begun to return, and now it is the time for the battleship." Looking for the Lost Ship Girl. Author, Hai De Rong Yan. Chapter 254. Everyone has their own life. The European admirals are surrounded by warblers, and the African admirals also have something that the European admirals cannot experience, which is the loyal and unswerving love between the admiral and the ship's wife that only belongs to them. Tian Hao has been an admiral for many years, but failed to build a ship girl after countless constructions. After countless sorties, I still didn't get a ship girl, even just a destroyer. Just like the song that was popular in the college for a long time, I drink alone and get drunk, and 7 or 8 kaoshung sleep with me. Although he does not have 7 or 8 Kaohsiungs, he still has 1 Kaohsiung as a wedding ship. Barely suitable. In the afternoon, I met my junior Sugu at the dock, so I told him the news I got from various channels. Although he lived a worry-free life as an admiral, there were times when he encountered danger. If it was said to be dangerous, then the attack of the deep-sea ship girl definitely counted. In this regard, he still takes good care of his younger generations. At this time, it was raining everywhere, not the continuous drizzle in spring, but heavy rain, and the heavy rain was falling. In this garden-style Tuttlary residence, rainwater dripped from the eaves and turned into a curtain. He was sitting on a bench in the town hall, with a plate on his knees, which contained the leftover sushi from lunch, which he was eating as a snack. It's starting to rain. It seems like there might really be a deep-sea fleet appearing in a few days. It's unusual to have such heavy rain in the season. Kaohsiung tied up his long black hair into a high bun. There were several hairpins inserted in the bun. Every time he moved the hairpins, the pendant moved accordingly. Has a strange charm. It's been a long time since I've encountered such a situation. As soon as she finished speaking, she suddenly saw 2 figures appearing in the rain curtain. With this kind of abnormal heavy rain, even ordinary people living in the county will hide in their homes with fear. Some people have even hid in the basement, eating dinner by candlelight, fearing that artillery fire would fall on their heads. The port city occupies the advantage of convenient maritime transportation, and it also bears the fear brought by the deep-sea ship girl at some point. At this time, the 2 figures in the rain curtain were getting closer and closer. The leader had long orange hair, and the hair was wet and stuck to his face. The man didn't look embarrassed at all as he walked along. He walked like a dragon and a tiger. At this time, Tian Hao recognized that person. After all, he also graduated from Chuangziu's academy. He could recognize it at a glance. It was Nelson, the battleship instructor in the academy. Then another person came over in the rain curtain, wearing a white uniform, and his whole body was soaked by the rain. At this time, the beautiful figure was revealed. It was the college teacher named Lin Di. Some time ago, I said I was out for business, but actually I was traveling with my ship girl. I heard that she has returned to the academy. She didn't expect to appear here. When she came out this time, her little destroyer that always followed her unexpectedly did not follow her. Nelson got straight to the point and said, "Admiral Tian Hao, recruit your ship girls to form a joint fleet." Tian Hao said, "What are you doing? You may have heard some rumors, but it's not accurate. In fact, the deep-sea fleet has already appeared, and has even set off." Linda said, "I am responsible for contacting the garrison offices in various places and uniting all nearby fleets." Tian Hao said, "What is the large fleet in the deep sea specifically? How about the abyssal Yamato, for example?" Hearing this answer, Tian Hao took a deep breath, and then hesitantly said, "If it is deep sea Yamato, my Kaohsiung has no use in the past. Even if all the ship girls in the nearby garrison unite, there is nothing they can do. It's difficult to rely on us alone, but in this special situation, the instructors from our academy will also show up. And we have contacted the ship girl headquarters, and they should send someone over. But we can't just wait like this, we need to unite." After Nelson finished speaking, he waved his hand and said, Okay, we won't let your Kaohsiung face the deep-sea Yamato. After all, she is just a heavy cruiser. She just needs to clean up the other deep-sea ship girls involved." Being slighted, if it were a young man, he would have blushed and explained. In fact, although Tian Hao has an exaggerated and even wretched personality, he is strong enough in tactical analysis and calm enough. He became the admiral of a party just by relying on Kaohsiung. He has no problem in terms of ability. Knowing that Nelson, his instructor, didn't quite understand the occasion, Tian Hao stretched out his hand to cover the palm of his wedding ship, Kaohsiung, and said, "Okay then." He turned to look at Cao Sheng, be safe. After saying that, he blinked and they understood each other. The action of blinking means that if it is really necessary, it doesn't matter even if you retreat, even if you are a deserter, the worst thing is where the two of you will hide when the time comes. Linda said, I will contact everyone. I remember that the admiral named Sugu is also nearby. He is in the first place. Chibolin and Akagi are also there. Although they are very strong, they are not enough to cope with that. The deep-sea ship girl. Saying this, Linda pulled on her clothes to prevent them from being wet and clinging to her skin, highlighting her figure and breast shape. Just as many people call her an unreliable teacher, she is also able to spare herself when necessary. After getting the news, the college made an emergency plan. She had a decisive personality, and with her strength, ordinary people dared to travel around the world at this time. We are taking Cao Sheng away. Tianhao, you have to come with us. I will go to Sugu's garrison later and take the mountain road there, it's too far. Let's take the waterway. I'll lend you the yacht. As he was talking like this, he suddenly saw firelight in the sky. That direction. Tianhao said, that direction is Sugu's garrison, There's a fight there. Look at the fire. There are quite a few battleships. I'll go there and tell them to retreat. Nelson held Lindy's shoulders, shook his head and said, you can't do it, you stay here to unite everyone, and notify the local government by the way, so that ordinary people can hide in bunkers when they should, and go to air raid shelters when they should. The ones in the basement are temporarily hiding in the basement. This is a rare situation, and there is no way. This is not an enemy that can be simply eliminated by relying on numbers. It requires an attacking force, otherwise even the armor of deep-sea Yamato will not be able to be penetrated. The two people looked at each other without thinking too much. This was not the time to give in or act out of emotion. Nelson walked into the rain again, and Linda motioned to Cao Sheng, who was coming over with an umbrella and towel, to say no. On the other side, the opening of the aircraft carrier wiped out some of the deep-sea ship girls, but there were still a lot of remaining deep-sea ship girls. The aircraft carrier's time is over, both fighters and bombers need to return home, and then replenish ammunition and fuel to play a role in the bombardment battle. Bismarck stepped on the sea with both feet, and the sea rippled, unscientifically holding her firmly on the sea. At this time, the turret on her ship turned towards the deep-sea ship girl. Various messages in her mind were combined, and the gun barrel was slightly raised to form an angle. Then Bismarck waved his hand, and the cannonball flew out of the dark muzzle. At the same time, the strong recoil pushed her whole body back, causing waves to splash behind her. It is obviously very difficult to directly hit the enemy in an artillery battle. If a real warship does not know how many shells it takes to hit the enemy, even if it shoots across the target, the hit rate is actually not too high. If the enemy is a ship girl, it will be even more difficult than hitting a battleship because the target is too small. However, at this time, a series of artillery shells flew towards the enemy, and the artillery shells accurately hit the enemy who was advancing at high speed. Smoke rose, followed by the sound of a series of shelling. There was an explosion and the flames burned. When the heavy rain fell, the deep-sea destroyer at its original position could no longer be seen. Bismarck took the lead and eliminated the enemy immediately, followed by the shelling of Bizai. Her ship uniform was similar to that of her sister. Although he is usually lazy, his sharp gaze is revealed at this time. If Sugu were here, he could probably imagine a giant panda shouting that the bear people will never be slaves. The black and white painted ship uniform had not been revealed for a long time, but now it finally showed its ferocious appearance. However, Beizai is not as capable as a flagship killer than her sister, and her hits are obviously worse. It's not like one shot in the game is basically a hit. After all, that's just a way of expression. Otherwise, would it be enough to go from day to night with just 2 shots? Compared to his sister, the artillery fire from Bizai came out. 1, 2, and continuous blasts. I don't know how many rounds it took to overturn a deep-sea light cruiser. Prince Eugen went to his sister, Admiral Hipper, and came back soon, just in time for such a battle. After a long time, she finally had a chance to protect her sister Bismarck. Her ship is equipped with 2 pieces of armor that are like shields. In addition, Sugu originally equipped her with medium armor. At this time, she is like a fortress on the sea. Move forward under fire, always on the lookout for possible attacks. Suddenly seeing the artillery fire coming, she sailed in front of Bismarck, held up her armor with both hands, and artillery fire bombarded her armor. Tisk, the gunfire bounced off the shield. Shake. The gunfire didn't cause her any damage, just a scratch. After blocking the artillery fire for his sister Bismarck, the blue-haired girl Prince Eugen showed a happy smile. However, as a protected person, Bismarck looked indifferent. Bizai saw Prince Eugen's movements. Although she was lazy, she knew everything. At this time, she curled her lips and said, "That cannonball can't hit at all." "Why are you blocking it, Prince Eugen? And even if it is a hit, and the destroyer's attack did no harm to my sister at all. Even if it was inserted, there would be no damage. My sister's armor is so thick." Eugen smiled awkwardly. When he saw his teammates being attacked, no matter whether they could dodge or not, no matter whether they could cause harm to others, they would always block it subconsciously. Bazai said, "You are always like that, you were like that before, and you are still like that now. You need to change some of your problems, and you need to be scolded by the admiral." Bismarck sailed at the front, but did not leave the team. Hearing Bazai's words, he said coldly, "You have so many problems, don't talk about Prince Eugen. I will burn all your books when you get back, be careful together. Turn around, the enemy is coming up." The Prince of Wales has armored gauntlets that reach to the elbow joints, and leggings that reach to the knees. Her entire ship uniform is pitch black. Just like when she was first revealed, many people suspected that she was a deep-sea ship girl. Different from Bismarck's ship uniform, her ship uniform is like a chariot. Sitting on it, she is like a king. But it is more similar to the King of Darkness than the title of king. The red wine glass was crushed by her before the battle. Compared to Bismarck, her ship equipment was weaker, and even the equipment she carried was weaker. However, compared to Bismarck, she also has her own outstanding points. In the thunderstorm, she stretched her hand forward, and the turrets on both sides of the ship turned slowly and firmly. As the flagship, she is better at hitting enemies than anyone else. The raindrops had already wet her blonde hair. She snapped her fingers in the wind and rain, and the gunfire roared out. If we say who has the best equipment in this fleet, then the equipment for counterattack is the best. The best super long gun, Mk6, Type 91 armor-piercing projectile, but this is her first attack under the command of her master, except for the naval battle of Denmark Strait. She was wearing a black and white maid outfit, with thick armor on her right side, then a small turret, and a large chimney on her back. When it comes to where her turret is installed on the ship, unlike everyone else, her turret is on the big gun in her hand. The big gun was almost taller than her whole body. She held the big gun in both hands and blinked her golden and blue eyes. Now she was fighting back as a battle maid. The closer she is to her master, the stronger she becomes, and both the master and the garrison are behind her. Now, counterattack, invincible. The artillery roared, the artillery fire crisscrossed, there were carrier-based aircraft in the sky, and there were flashes of fire. There were torpedoes under the water, and countless bubbles emerged from behind the torpedoes and moved forward. Firefly fired several torpedoes. She pointed at the deep-sea ship girl in front of her and said loudly, "I want to hit that heavy cruiser." As soon as she finished speaking, the cold voice of the Prince of Wales appeared, Firefly, stay behind me and don't rush forward unless you want to die. The Prince of Wales was still very majestic, and Firefly immediately stopped talking and could only mutter, "The torpedoes can't hit them now. It will be better to wait until night, so just hit them." Firefly was mumbling, and Amethyst Quartz was mumbling even more. She complained, "I'm obviously at the back, why are all those deep-sea ship girls attacking me, whether it's shelling, carrier-based aircraft, or torpedoes? I almost didn't get out of the way and actually attacked a noble lady, I curse you." At this time, a cannonball hit her behind, waves pushed in all directions, and huge water columns rose. Amethyst immediately hugged her head. She was not an unconscious battleship, but a little girl who was a bit middle-aged, so she would be scared. Zeppelin had participated in many battles and had never seen anything like this. The shipborne mechanism is empty and the ground is cleared at the opening. Black Ghost's Bismarck bombardment, she is indeed a flagship killer. Bazi, who had always been lazy, also showed his ferocious side. The Prince of Wales' excellent commanding skills have improved the entire team. She was called an all-around maid by her student Sugu. She always encouraged herself to surpass her sister and her cooking ability was as strong as it could be. Seeing her at this time reminds people of the words battle maid and majestic. York City had never seen everyone attack at the same time. She murmured, "Is this what artillery warfare is like? You fight here and I fight back. It's different from the battle of our aircraft carrier." Zeppelin said, "It's not just that, the attack of the ship girl is not just an artillery battle. You know what it's like for those powerful countries to drive those huge fishery boats and run over the small fishing boats of other countries. The picture, next, just take a good look at it. Looking for the Lost Ship Girl." Author, Hai De Rong Yan. Chapter 255. The ammunition depot has its limits and cannot be endless, and reloading also takes a certain amount of time. However, there are endless enemies in the field of vision. If you use artillery fire to deal with all enemies, you may run out of ammunition in the end, but the enemy at the end is the most difficult enemy to deal with. As a professional instructor, although he suffered a setback during the aviation battle and repeatedly failed to hit the mark, I have to say that Zeppelin's vision is still unique. She immediately pointed out what might happen next. Before the ship girls appeared, the only ones that fought against the deep-sea ship girls were those huge steel battleships. But unlike a ship girl who can recover after entering the channel for at most one day, if those steel battleships are injured, let alone the resources consumed, the most important thing is that it is possible to enter the slipway for several months before combat effectiveness can be guaranteed, unless you have super strong damage. Management ability. The combat effectiveness of those steel battleships depends not only on the capabilities of the battleship itself, but also on a country's logistics, supplies, and industrial strength. Because of these harsh abilities, the giant steel ship has no advantage at all in the battle against the deep-sea ship girls. Then with the appearance of ship girls, steel battleships completely withdrew from the stage of fighting against deep-sea ship girls. Unlike those steel behemoths, ship girls are easy to repair, and they dare to do things that many warships dare not do. Imagine a scene where you see those huge steel ships with huge displacements crashing into those warships that are much smaller than them. It is nothing more than a scene of a small ship being rolled into two by a big ship. Ship girls who have inherited the soul of a battleship are much more powerful than those who have inherited the soul of a destroyer. If there is no shelling, you can sink the enemy just by relying on melee combat. The feeling is that the battleship is ramming towards the destroyer. You will not be injured at all, but you can destroy the enemy. At this time, the battlefield was full of artillery fire and water jets. Occasionally, you could see a deep-sea destroyer being hit by a shell, turning into pieces, and then struggling on the sea. However, the fate of sinking was still unchangeable. The destroyers, which were like beasts without wisdom, rushed to the front, and they were the fastest. The deep-sea battleships with their hulls set up were at the end, sitting on the hulls that looked like steel sea dragons. Then the steel sea dragon opened its mouth with a squeaking sound of metal friction, and gunfire burst out from the barrel in its mouth. At this time, Bismarck looked at the enemy sailing towards her. She abandoned long-range artillery combat in order to save ammunition. Thanks to its heavy armor as a battleship, she has rarely been defeated in battles for a long time, and she has no fear. Her opponent at this time was a deep-sea heavy cruiser with short silver hair, a red and black ribbon covering her left eye, and simple clothes that exposed her sexy lower breasts and flat belly. The hands are wearing gloves that look like sea beasts, and the ship's armor at the back is like a steel tail. The end of the tail is a machine gun and a muzzle. Bismarck wanted close combat, but the deep-sea heavy cruiser may not have the same idea of close combat as she did. When the deep-sea heavy cruiser saw Bismarck, she raised her hand and fired a cannonball. The shells ejected from the sea beast glove in his hand and hit Bismarck directly. However, if it did not hit the weak point similar to the ammunition depot, it would cause a powerful critical attack. The artillery fire at this time caused no damage at all in front of Bismarck's heavy armor. At this time, the two were sailing head-on on the sea and then past each other. Bismarck punched the deep-sea heavy cruiser in the face while facing each other. Even beasts are particularly keen on the sense of crisis. Seeing Bismarck punching him in the face, as a deep-sea heavy cruiser, he stretched out his hand to block it. She grabbed the fist with both hands, then turned around and tried to throw Bismarck away. However, the power of a battleship is not that simple. 4 tails can move 1,000 pounds. At least you still have the strength of 4 tails. You must know how to move it. The deep-sea heavy cruiser's struggle was completely useless. Bismarck's punch caused one of the deep-sea heavy cruiser's arms to bend into a weird shape. With his slender feet on the water, Bismarck's right hand struck again with huge power. At this time, he punched the deep-sea heavy cruiser in the face. Tighten, sail, turn. Bismarck moved towards the deep-sea heavy cruiser again, directly hitting the deep-sea heavy cruiser with his shoulder, and then struck with an elbow. She never holds back against the deep-sea ship girls. There would be no suspense in a one-on-one battle. Bismarck was crushing the enemy like a god descending from the earth. It was not a battle, it could almost be said to be an insult. Bismarck sank an enemy with ease, leaving the city of York stunned. Zeppelin said, in history, there were still boarding battles between warships. However, with the development of artillery, boarding fighting was gradually abandoned. Victory no longer relied on the hand-to-hand combat of sailors. Powerful artillery was what battleships relied on for survival. Weapons. However, with the existence of the battleship today, the ship girl still maintains the power and speed as powerful as a battleship, but does not have the same size as a battleship. And the ship girl who inherits the soul of the battleship maintains strong power and speed at the same time the body shape has been greatly reduced. The speed of artillery fire and torpedoes is still the same, but the size of the target has shrunk by an unknown number of times, and although the artillery fire can be aimed, it cannot be locked. Because of the loading of ammunition, it cannot attack the enemy with fire coverage like a machine gun. Then it will be much more difficult to hit the enemy and cause damage. At this time, there is close combat, which belongs to the close combat of the ship girl. Zeppelin said this, and she finally gained the authority as an instructor. While Bismarck crushed the enemy to pieces, unlike Bismarck, the Prince of Wales' enemy was only a deep-sea light cruiser. As early as in the original battle, the Prince of Wales's eye patch was destroyed by a cannonball. The eye patch was destroyed, and the exposed eyes were like burning flames. Her hair that was originally tied to the sides was spread out due to the battle, and her long golden hair was flying in the sea breeze. She is not embarrassed, on the contrary, she is more heroic. Like Bismarck, she easily defeated the deep-sea light cruiser, but at this time the light cruiser struggled on the surface of the sea and had not yet sunk. The abyssal light cruiser sailed on the surface, trying to escape, and the Prince of Wales gave chase. It's a bit unsightly to fight too elaborately. Since the opponent is stubbornly resisting, he doesn't care about more. At this time, the Prince of Wales reached out and grabbed the arm of the deep-sea light cruiser and dragged it back hard. As a battleship, her power was much stronger than the enemy's. Even though the light cruiser tried to sail at this time, it was forcefully pulled back. No. After grabbing the enemy's arm, the Prince of Wales suddenly stood firm on his feet with the help of high-speed sailing. At this time, her other hand immediately grabbed the opponent's wrist with both hands, and then she rotated with her feet as the center of the circle. With the acceleration of the navigation, the enemy was suddenly thrown into the sky like a rag doll. Then spinning around in the sky, the Prince of Wales suddenly pulled the person out of the air and threw him into the water. From an outsider's point of view, this kind of battle is too harsh, but the opponent is a deep-sea ship girl. Throwing the enemy into the water, the Prince of Wales let go of her hand after the opponent fell into the water. Then when the deep-sea light cruiser struggled to swim forward, she immediately grabbed the opponent's ankle and pulled it back. Swim again and pull again. Pull the enemy's thigh for the second time. The third time he grabbed the enemy's clothes by the back of his neck, like a cat teasing a mouse, and let him go, then grabbed him again when he wanted to leave. In the end, the Prince of Wales stretched out his hand, picked up the enemy's neck and lifted him into the air. The deep-sea light cruiser was still resisting, and the Prince of Wales ignored the enemy completely. He watched the opponent place his hands on his own palms that were holding his neck, and kept trying to open the slender but steel-like fingers. The legs of the deep-sea light cruiser kicked wildly in the air, but before they could hit the Prince of Wales, they were immediately blocked by the armor installed on the Prince of Wales's ship, which had no effect. The Prince of Wales sneered, and then the huge ship mounted the turret behind him and slowly turned, aiming at the person in his hand. After a few seconds, the barrel vibrated and even swayed due to the recoil, and then a blazing fireball erupted. It was a powerful enough force to suffocate. After destroying a deep-sea light cruiser, the Prince of Wales waved his hand and counterattacked and sailed to the Prince of Wales. "Have you been suppressed for too long?" The Prince of Wales turned to look at the counterattack and smiled. The counterattack continued, "You also have to pay attention. Everyone is watching. Maybe he will tell the master when the time comes. You don't want to scare him." "Him? So what if he scares you?" "I obviously saw it. He brought red wine to you that day. You were very happy. Sometimes it's time to take action. The Admiral is quite timid." The Prince of Wales chuckled and turned to look at Firefly and Amethyst. The two little girls were frightened and quickly shook their heads to indicate that they would not say anything. The Prince of Wales said, "He said whoever wins the MVP must meet one requirement." Haha, that was a cruel smile. In the distance, York City was talking to Zeppelin. Her short hair was dancing in the sea breeze, and the ribbon on her chest and skirt were swaying in the wind. At this time, I saw the battle scene of the Prince of Wales, and I was somewhat glad that I had never provoked him. York City said, "I still think the battles of our aircraft carriers are more elegant, they are too violent." "Violence? What is violence?" Fletcher, dressed in a maid outfit, launched a torpedo. She sailed next to counterattack and said, "Sister, counterattack." She retorted, "What?" She still had love for this destroyer who also practiced the ways of a maid. Fletcher said, "Bismarck and the Prince of Wales are so powerful." "Yes, they are very powerful, but if you have seen my sister and my sister's reputation, you will probably be more surprised. My sister is the figure I have been pursuing, but compared to her, I still have many shortcomings." Under Fletcher's gaze, counterattack stretched out his hand, raised his thumb, and used his thumb as a crosshair. The target was a deep-sea battleship. She raised the big gun in her hand and said, "Look, it's her." The deep-sea battleship in the distance seemed to have noticed this. The steel sea dragon roared towards the counterattack, and the gun barrel in its mouth was aimed at the counterattack. Lifting the gun, aiming, the shells were sprayed out. The shells carried flames and accurately hit the steel sea dragon in a parabola. When the smoke dissipated, the steel sea dragon had no head. Counterattack put away the big gun, smiled at Fletcher, and said, "How is it?" Bismarck's punch hit the enemy and shattered the enemy's ship. The Battle of the Prince of Wales was somewhat like a massacre. Counterattack likes to point a big gun at your enemy's face and pull the trigger. Bismarck and the Prince of Wales destroyed the enemy as if they were in competition, and did not fall behind at all in their counterattacks. As for Baysai, she is doing soy sauce, although it only looks like she is doing soy sauce, her lazy expression is too deceptive. After sinking a deep-sea battle cruiser, Baysai asked Prince Eugen, "When will we go back? I want to rest." Frontal ramming, cross-firing, fire coverage, and the occasional torpedo appearing from the shadows, battleships were the only ones to perform, and carrier-based aircraft dived from the sky to drop explosives. Seeing all this on the battlefield, York City thought of the comics that his admiral liked to read, not books but comics. One day I met him on the roadside, and he introduced himself to reading it, saying it was a lawn mowing comic. The scene at this time is just like mowing grass. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Looking for the Lost Ship Girl. Author, Hai De Rong Yan. Chapter 256. Lexington led Saratoga and Akagi in a round of air superiority and opening to eliminate quite a few deep-sea ship girls, and then Bismarck and the Prince of Wales led everyone in artillery battles and close combat. After several rounds of fighting like this, those unqualified boats have been almost cleared away. The deep-sea ship girls who are still alive today simply have a certain amount of wisdom and do not rush blindly like wild beasts, similar to large ships like deep-sea battleships. And inside these deep-sea ships, it is gradually getting late at night. Originally, there was no air superiority, and the effectiveness of carrier-based aircraft was getting worse and worse. Deep-sea aircraft carriers are actually targets now. Only deep-sea battleships and deep-sea battle cruisers can be considered threats. At night, the torpedoes gradually had some effect. Firefly and Amethyst's torpedoes sank a deep-sea battleship. They were now hugging each other and cheering. Saratoga's carrier-based aircraft also gradually lost their effectiveness, and she stood outside the battlefield jumping to her feet. But it was useless. Lexington would not allow her to continue charging forward. So now only Bismarck and the Prince of Wales are left competing. Ready to move forward. Turn around. Bismarck signaled Baysai and Prince Eugen to follow him. Her clothes were burned in the gunfire, revealing half of her round shoulders and the deep ravine on her chest, but she didn't care. After all, there are women around here, so even if you go back, you will be admiring a man. The small ships in the deep sea have been slaughtered, and now almost all of them are large ships. Bismarck still does not want to fight close to the deep sea battleships or battle cruisers. There is no way to achieve absolute crushing in terms of tonnage and strength, and it is easy to get injured in close combat. Although I don't want to admit it, I am a big eater of steel. Besides, the original ammunition was saved just for this time. Bismarck glanced at Prince Eugen, who stood beside her and also looked at Bismarck. They had traveled together for such a long time, and often they could understand each other's thoughts with just a glance. Bismarck nodded, and Prince Eugen also nodded, which meant that all defense issues were left to me, and Sister Bismarck was free to attack. Bismarck looked at Baysai again. Baysai lowered his head and looked at his sleeves. He had no sense of crisis at all, so Bismarck could only give his sister a slap in the face. Baysai, pay attention to the front. Baysai raised his head aggrievedly and said, just look and tell. Why do you want to beat someone? Bismarck did not explain, but just stared at the deep-sea battleship in the distance. In fact, for them, the deep-sea ships in front of them are not that strong. Except for several deep-sea aircraft carriers that have no combat effectiveness until now, there are no more than 10 enemies that are still threatening. At this time, Bismarck raised the ship's turret slightly and aimed at a deep-sea battlecruiser with silver-haired twin tails and a steel sea shark. The fort turned at an angle, mentally calculating the distance, elevation angle, and speed of the two sides. Then the cannonballs were fired, but only water columns rose in the distance. Bismarck sighed, hitting the target is really not that easy. Bismarck sighed. At this moment, he suddenly heard cheers and looked to the side. Beside her, her sister Baizai looked happy and said, "Another deep-sea ship girl has been eliminated. Let me calculate how many results there are." "Sister," you said, "if you have one result, buy me one. This is a book, you can't go back on it." "My idiot sister, MVP is the most important." Saying this in his mind, Bismarck dodged a cannonball coming towards him. Although the enemies are all big ships, there were originally so many deep-sea ship girls that did not cause any harm to everyone, let alone this time. At this time, Bismarck looked around. The Prince of Wales sat on his ship's suit, tapped his suit with his fingers, and gunfire spurted out. Counterattack took his big gun and inserted the muzzle into the mouth of the deep-sea battleship Steel Sea Dragon. Then the Steel Sea Dragon trembled and cracks appeared on the steel armor. The battle has almost progressed so far, and that seems to be it. Saratoga was calculating its results, and after all calculations, it seemed that winning the MVP was still not a sure thing. Lexington is already thinking about what to do next. Zeppelin and York City said, "It's really surprising. The deep-sea fleet was destroyed like this. It feels like a bit of chaos." York City also nodded and said, "Yes, so fast." With that said, the two people were about to approach Lexington, when a voice came through the rain curtain. "Zeppelin." It was a very familiar voice, although I hadn't heard it for a long time. But when he heard it, Zeppelin immediately recognized it. That was the voice of Battleship Nelson, the guy in the academy who always wanted to find trouble if he didn't deal with him. Zeppelin turned his head and saw that Nelson was all soaked by the rain. He had all his ship's uniform opened and was wearing the uniform of an academy instructor with an anxious expression. Nelson stopped in front of the two men and said, "I followed the direction of the gunfire and found here. Why are you standing here? What is going on in front of you?" York City also saw Nelson and shouted, "Instructor Nelson." Nelson glanced at York City, which was the initial ship of the admiral named Sugu, and she waved her hand to indicate that she knew. Seeing two people at this time, to be honest, Nelson was a little confused now. Why are the two of them standing here as if nothing happened? Except for the sailing legs on the ship, their other ship equipment has not been unfolded. There was clearly a battle ahead, and we could see the arc of artillery fire across the air. Nelson said, "I clearly saw the artillery fire." York City said, "Yes, our garrison is sniping at the deep-sea ship girls." "Deep-sea ship girl, I'm just here to tell you to return to the garrison and hide." "Why hide? We have already won." Nelson looked around and said, "If you win, destroy some deep-sea destroyers." "Don't be stupid. Do you know how many deep-sea destroyers there are in the deep-sea fleet? They must be more than 50. Do you know what that concept is?" Nelson said this, and then saw a figure sailing by in front. Appearing in the field of vision, the person who defeated her in a fight when she was in the academy seemed to be Bismarck, who was nicknamed the Black Ghost. She appeared here? It had long been obvious that she had something to do with Sugu, but she didn't expect to appear here at this time. If it were her, she would indeed be able to fight back and forth with the deep-sea ship girl, but she would have to face the deep-sea fleet in a hurry. After all, it was not something that one person could handle. Zeppelin looked at Nelson, who had always been at odds with him. Although he often failed to predict the development of the situation, he didn't mind showing off in front of him. Zeppelin said arrogantly, "It's difficult to explain the specific situation to you, but you just need to know that we have won." Faced with Zeppelin's sarcasm, which at least seemed sarcastic to Nelson, Nelson said, "You don't even know who is standing behind these deep-sea ship girls." Nelson looked around. In fact, because a large number of deep-sea ship girls had been eliminated, the surrounding area was empty. The battle on the sea will not leave any wreckage. There are no debris, no terrifying craters, and no collapsed high-rise buildings. All the sunken deep-sea ship girls have sunk to the bottom of the sea forever. By the time Nelson came over, the scene was actually calm. Nelson looked at Zeppelin and said, "Since Bismarck is here, and since Akagi is here, I believe you have eliminated the advanced troops of the deep sea. That is indeed amazing, but do you know the deep sea flagship? Do you know the deep sea Yamato? This the one who criticizes Abyssal Ship Girl is Abyssal Yamato. You should know how terrifying she is. In the academy, I, the dean, and a few others, in short, there is no one in the entire academy who can penetrate her armor and cause her harm. I can count how many people there are on one hand." Nelson looked at York City again, startling the latter. After all, this time is not the time to quarrel or teach others. Nelson said, "Let everyone go back and hide in the underground bunker. As for the deep-sea flagship, wait until everyone is gathered together." As she said this, the rest of her words were suddenly swallowed because two shadows had appeared in her field of vision. The leader of them is the deep-sea battleship, and next to it is the deep-sea destroyer. The leader of the deep-sea battleship, her long silver hair was tied up, there was a horn on her forehead, and one of her eyes was replaced by a sharp blade-like horn. A black and white terrifying behemoth's head-like ship is mounted on its side, with a huge caliber gun barrel protruding from the behemoth's forehead. Cannons are justice, big is good, more is beautiful. If the admiral who firmly believed in this theory was here, he would probably have started screaming. The enemy's ship uniform is so oppressive and shocking. At this time, in the faint light and heavy rain, the deep-sea battleship seemed to be shrouded in an evil purple light, and terror and overwhelming pressure rushed towards it. "That's Abyssal Yamato, that's Yamato, the Abyssal flagship. Let everyone retreat before it's too late." At this time, seeing Yamato Fukumai looking around, Nelson said, "Let's go quickly, or she will keep an eye on you." "Did you hear that voice?" Yamato Fukumai seemed to be saying dash. "She is saying, do you feel it? This biting coldness, as well as the near eternal darkness and despair. Now start giving it back to you double." This was not the first time that Nelson saw Yamato Fukumai. Thinking of the previous battles, fear still lingered in his heart. However, her character has always been unyielding. In fact, now she feels her body trembling and wants to fight the enemy. However, she finally understood that now was not the time, and not so many people could be dealt with. "That is a strong enemy." She continued, "Did you hear that?" She seemed to be saying, "Run, little girl, run." No sound could be heard in the air except the sound of rain and the roar of the sea wind. In fact, the sound of the deep-sea flagship would only appear in everyone's mind, and the way of transmission was not sound waves but fear. But York City has no brains. At this time, she muttered in a low voice, "I have never seen deep-sea Yamato," but she looked over and looked over. I think she was just saying, "Hey, where is my big fleet? It was here just now, so a bigger fleet." The voice of the deep-sea flagship spread through fear, but York City had no fear. At this time, she just felt that Yamato Fukumai in her field of vision was looking around, not wanting to write down everyone to impose fear and sanctions, but simply wondering where her fleet had gone, but her fleet had all sunk. Looking for the lost ship girl. Author, Hai De Rong Yan. Chapter 257. Deep-sea flagships have powerful firepower and thick armor. Many people think that they are intelligent. In fact, As to whether the deep-sea flagship has intelligence, these are all analyzed from some photos and rumors. For example, its Yamato Fukumi's swimsuit, or the book Tirpitz Fukumi holds in his hand. After all, no one has had close contact with or communicated with the deep-sea flagship. No one knows the details. Deep-sea Yamato has repeatedly appeared in human sight in the past, more than any deep-sea flagship. Although there is a record of defeating the deep-sea Yamato, the admiral and the ship girl gathered a lot of strength back then. After all, a deep-sea flagship with heavy armor and powerful firepower cannot defeat such an enemy simply by relying on numbers. And even if there is a competition in terms of numbers, every time a deep-sea flagship appears, there are quite a few deep-sea ship girls accompanying it. Nelson had seen Yamato Fukumi before. At that time, she was not an instructor at the academy and was still considered a junior in the circle of ship girls. At that time, she followed her seniors and launched an attack on Yamato Fukumi. Not surprisingly, all the attacks were repulsed. It was hard to describe the feeling of seeing the senior whom I admired being defeated by the enemy's one shot. Although I am no longer what I was before, both in terms of experience and equipment, I am even stronger than my predecessors. However, facing Yamato Abyss at this time, he still felt deep fear in his heart. Nelson saw the deep-sea Yamato, and of course everyone standing on the battlefield also saw the deep-sea Yamato. When deep-sea Yamato appears, this side is already ready. Bismarck's expression became serious, and the Prince of Wales also suppressed his smile, and patted Fletcher on the head in return, telling the latter to step back. They could recognize who it was, and they could feel the powerful force in it. It was a powerful enemy. Only Bizai scratched his long pink hair and said, "Who is that?" Bismarck said, "That is the deep-sea Yamato, the deep-sea flagship." The deep-sea flagship, deep-sea Yamato, sounds very powerful. It seems that I have seen it before, but it seems that I have never seen it before. Speaking of Helena's swimsuit, she snatched it from Yamato Fukumi. Is that Yamato Fukumi? Have no idea. Bazai said, "Then what should we do now? What else can we do? No matter what the enemy is, sink her." After Bismarck said this, Prince Eugen said, "The deep-sea flagship never appears alone. You see, she seems to be looking left and right. Is she waiting for her fleet?" Bizai said, "Didn't her fleet be wiped out by us? What else is she looking at?" At this time, the Prince of Wales also approached Bismarck. Competition is competition, but when facing a strong enemy, everyone will still join hands. Just like in the past, when facing those powerful deep-sea ship girls, no matter who they are, they must abandon their conflicts and advance and retreat together. The Prince of Wales looked solemn. Compared to the original enemy, the tricky deep-sea flagship was in her field of vision. She said, "That is the deep-sea Yamato. I know. Although the deep-sea flagship has been destroyed before, everyone knows how powerful the deep-sea flagship is. Strategically, we despise the enemy, but tactically, we value the enemy. We never dare to underestimate the deep-sea flagship. Be careful to dodge and don't get close to the enemy. She is very powerful." Everyone was quite vigilant, but Bizai said, "Hurry up, go home as soon as the fight is over, I'll sink the deep-sea destroyer first." After discussing it, we couldn't come up with any good solution. After being out for such a long time, Bizai wanted to take a rest. Anyway, no matter what the enemy is, just sink her. At this time, Bizai controlled the turret on his ship to change its direction, and then fired towards the deep-sea destroyer next to deep-sea Yamato. The shells streaked across the sky. At this time, the people around were still surprised by Bizai's bold behavior. In his sight, he saw the cannonball flying through the air. It did not land on the bow of the deep-sea destroyer, nor did it accidentally land in the sea and splash water. The shell landed accurately on the deep-sea Yamato. "You didn't mean to hit the abyssal destroyer, why did you hit the abyssal Yamato?" I don't know why, I just shot at the deep-sea destroyer, really. I couldn't feel the powerful power from that destroyer. Judging from the appearance, the deep-sea destroyer was not much different from ordinary deep-sea destroyers. There was really nothing special about it. Bismarck said, never mind that. The Prince of Wales said, whether she is deep-sea Yamato, deep-sea Bismarck, or deep-sea Tirpitz, no matter what enemy she is, destroy her. Firefly and Amethyst Quartz, you prepare torpedoes, counterattack, and sink that ship first destroyer. He responded with a retort, then looked at the Prince of Wales, thinking, did you really not mean to say that? Bismarck of the deep and Tirpitz of the deep and so on. Sink the deep-sea destroyer first. When these words were spoken, everyone was already ready to fire cannonballs and torpedoes at the deep-sea destroyer. The gunfire drew a beautiful arc in the air and blasted towards the deep-sea destroyer. All attacks were indeed aimed at the deep-sea destroyer during preparation. However, 9 out of 10 of these attacks flew in the direction of deep-sea Yamato, or else they all exploded water columns around the deep-sea destroyer. At this time, the deep-sea destroyer not moving at all. I can't hit it. All were dodged. Bizai, why did your attack hit deep-sea Yamato again? Bizai called Chu, it's so strange. The error is still to say that she is simply imagining, why can't she hit? Let's rush forward. No, Fukumai Yamato is very strong. After a long while, he counterattacked, I think that destroyer is called Yukikaze. Everyone was silent. Bismarck raised his hand and shouted, turn around, target deep-sea Yamato. Meanwhile, enraged by so many attacks, Fukumai Yamato sailed toward the Bismarck, the barrels above the battery slowly raised. That was Yamato Aokai, the Akaime ship girl who inherited the soul of the battleship Yamato. The battleship Yamato was originally a battleship, and it was a very powerful battleship in old history. Whether it was the Bismarck or the Prince of Wales, there was no way to compare with each other. She's sailing over, deep-sea flagship, everyone, be careful, stop her. Bismarck, Bizai, Prince of Wales and counterattack all attacked the enemy, with some hits and some misses. No matter who they are, they all have the strength of the front line of the garrison. The original deep-sea battleships almost sank after taking only one shell. However, the deep-sea Yamato in front of them seemed to be unscathed by so many attacks. Harm. She was angry, said Prince Eugen. The Prince of Wales said, everyone, aim at 15 degrees, ready, 1, 2, 3. Fire. Full fire, boom, boom, boom. Bismarck said calmly, she turned. Reload, rotate the turret, aim at the enemy, boom boom boom. She saw Amethyst, and Amethyst moved out of the way. Amethyst was in a daze, and then she started running, shouting as she ran, why is it me again? Everyone prepare dash. Boom boom boom. Her suit is cracked, the attack is effective, be careful to dodge the attack, she starts to seem very angry. Pay attention to dodge, pay attention to dodge. Fletcher, please stop firing torpedoes at that deep-sea snow wind. It's useless. Boom boom boom. The turret on her hull seemed to be bent, and she seemed to be in shock. This time there were no cannonballs, instead the torpedoes of Fireflies, Amethyst Quartz, and Fletcher greeted Yamato Abyssal. Amethyst shouted, she's staring at me again, oh, no. Prince Eugen stood next to Amethyst and said, don't worry, I'm here. The enemy advances and we retreat. There are so many of us, but she is the only one. It feels like she is bullying others. Prince Eugen, stop talking, show no mercy, attack with all your strength. On the other side, when he saw Yamato Fukumai, Nelson rushed forward immediately. York City also wanted to rush forward, but was held back by Zeppelin, because as an aircraft carrier, it was useless to rush forward. Nelson rushed up and sailed to half the distance, wanting to communicate with Bismarck and the others. Boom boom boom. Hearing this sound, she saw everyone attacking Deep Sea Yamato. Don't anger Fukumae Yamato. You should leave quickly while her fleet is away. Don't even think of your attacks penetrating Deep Sea Yamato's armor. Nelson thought this in his mind and wanted to shout. He opened his mouth and let the sea breeze flow into his mouth. The distance was getting closer and closer, and only then did Nelson notice the ship uniforms on everyone's bodies. Bismarck's full set of equipment, those are all Mk6. At this time, I thought to myself, I wonder if the entire academy can put together such a suit. It should be no problem. Principal Warpeter's equipment is very good. Who is that girl with pink hair? I have never seen the ship's uniform before, but it looks like Tirpitz, but not like it. Next to her is a blonde woman wearing a knight's outfit, with one eye like a burning flame, like a deep-sea flagship. Also, who is wearing the maid outfit? Her equipment is more gorgeous than everyone else's equipment. As Nelson drew closer, the pattern of the battlefield became clearer and clearer. At this time, the pattern became clearer and clearer, the sailing speed became slower and slower, and the expression changed from anxious to stunned. At this time Nelson saw, in front of them, the extremely powerful deep-sea flagship, the deep-sea Yamato. When she appeared, the pressure she brought left more than a dozen cities breathless. The combined fleet formed by more than 20 garrison houses, because the artillery fire of most of the ship girls could not penetrate her armor, almost everyone was shrouded in haze before the battle began. Although it was far away, Nelson suddenly saw the deep-sea monster sitting on the sea like a duck. Her long silver hair was messy, half of her ship's uniform was destroyed, half of her teeth were destroyed in her ship's uniform that looked like a giant steel beast's head, the gun barrel was twisted and bent, and her expression seemed a little aggrieved. The aggrieved expression actually appeared on the deep-sea flagship. Above. That deep-sea Yamato looked at himself, that expression seemed to be asking for help. Are you kidding me? Is the deep-sea flagship asking for help? What a mess. Nelson looked at Bismarck and several others standing in a row, and then at Yamato Fukumae. At this time, she inexplicably remembered that when she was in the college, those students rehearsed a show. The program is to tell everyone to never give up. I remember that festival. It was about a ship girl fighting in front of a large group of deep-sea ship girls. By relying on one person to survive in a large group of deep-sea ship girls, she never gave up or surrendered. There is a line in that show that is very classic, and I still remember that line to this day. You will be a coward for the rest of your life. Still have to be a hero, even if it's just for a few minutes. Nelson inexplicably felt that the scene this time was somewhat similar to that time. Thinking like this, she saw the deep-sea destroyer standing up. She also recognized that deep-sea destroyer, it was deep-sea Yukikaze, and she opened her hands to block the deep-sea Yamato. At this time Nelson thought of the words behind that line. You need more than just courage. The revolutionary cry from the bottom of my heart only serves to wake up a few people. The cannonball streaked across the sky with flames, and the cannonball flew over Fukumae Yukikaze's head, and then the cannonball accurately hit Fukumae Yamato. Looking for the Lost Ship Girl. Author, Hai-De Rong Yan. Chapter 258. Watching the figures receding in front of him, he counterattacked. They are starting to retreat. It is indeed a smart deep-sea flagship. Ordinary deep-sea ship girls don't know how to escape. In the past, we had to defeat them several times before we could completely sink them. Deep-sea flagships are not that easy to deal with. Shall we catch up now? Bismarck looked at the sky and then at the deep and dark sea in front of her. After thinking for a long time, she said, you can fire, but don't continue chasing. The ammunition consumption should be almost done. Bismarck said this. She knew a lot about deep-sea flagships. In the past, someone asked her to destroy those deep-sea flagships, but she was directly rejected. Although he is proud, he is also self-aware of his own abilities. Things that are obviously impossible will be rejected at the beginning. After all, deep-sea flagships are never so easy to destroy. We had just experienced a fierce battle earlier. It might not be a good thing to catch up at this time. The amount of ammunition affects the combat effectiveness. Prince Eugen said, "Will they come back for revenge?" Bismarck said, "Not for the time being, deep-sea Yamato also needs to recuperate, and deep-sea ship girl." After hearing his sister's words, Bizai showed a horrified expression. "I remember the admiral told me that there must be a Lich King. No, there must be a deep-sea flagship, otherwise the deep sea will lose control. The ship girl will become even more terrifying and unstoppable." Bismarck was silent for a moment and put a hand on his sister's head, thinking that you are really hopeless now. In her heart, she wanted to beat up her sister, but with a calm face, she said, "Be careful about the occasion, Tirpitz." When his sister called his name, Bizai knew it was time to shut up. The Prince of Wales said, "If you are not afraid of them now, are you afraid of them in the future?" Hood, Reputation, Lion, Vanguard, Rodney, and Nelson. Bismarck looked at the talking Prince of Wales and wanted to say, okay, I know you have many family members, but I really don't need to read them out one by one. They stood on the water talking and then heard Saratoga's voice. "Did you kill Yamato Fukumai?" "Knocked her off," said Bismarck. "I think the MVP this time is mine." Saratoga hugged her chest. As the strongest aircraft carrier in the garrison, although her carrier-based aircraft were not the most powerful, the effect of the opening was needless to say. There was silence around, and Saratoga said proudly, "It is indeed mine. The opening effect is very good, and if you think about it carefully, there are really many results that can be obtained." She had thought about it on the way here. If it was just about quantity, then she wouldn't dare say that she could crush the whole crowd. But if her sister didn't fight, she had nothing to fight for. Then there is no problem in becoming an MVP yourself. At this time, when Saratoga said that it should win the MVP, there was a silence. After silence, the Prince of Wales looked at counterattack. As an excellent maid, counterattack immediately knew that it was time to stand up for herself at this time. He countered, "To be fair, I think it should be the Prince of Wales." With the words reasonable as the prefix, the following words must be unreasonable. This sentence was first uttered by Sugu, and it was carried forward in the garrison. Prince Eugen also stood up and said, "No matter how you look at it, the MVP should be Sister Bismarck, the flagship killer, and the conductor." There is no debate at this point. Although Saratoga kills a lot of enemies, most of them are small boats. Counterattack does not join the fight. Bismarck and the Prince of Wales each have their own achievements, so at this time, you, me and her, no one has the achievements that can overwhelm everyone. The father-in-law is right and the mother-in-law is right. The most difficult things to deal with are wrangling. Bismarck thought for a moment and said, "Then let Zeppelin decide." They both knew that Zeppelin and York City were outside the battlefield. Saratoga retorted, "I think the city of York should be the judge. Zeppelin used to be an instructor at the academy, but York City can't do it." Of course Bismarck would not end. At this time, of course, her little secretary Prince Eugen appeared. "What's the academy? I can blow it up all by myself." Of course he was bragging. The argument couldn't stop, and at this time Bizai said, "Okay, let's go home." All around you could hear the sound of raindrops falling on the sea. Following Bizai's words, everyone looked at Bizai at the same time. She was the one who clamored to go back at first, and then she opened fire directly on Yamato Fukumai. Defeating deep-sea Yamato is everyone's achievement, but the one who fired the shot was Kitazaya. And, who is the most harmless of all? That's also Bizai. Even the Prince of Wales would admit that Bizai is the most harmless and useless guy. Moreover, for the Prince of Wales, the MVP cannot be given to Bismarck, and he does not want to fight back. As for Saratoga, she certainly knows the style of that girl. The Prince of Wales said, "I think the MVP should be Bazai." Bismarck was stunned for a moment. It was a bit incredible for the Prince of Wales to say such words. But nominating your own sister is not easy to refute. Bazai said, "Why me? I didn't do anything." She had no concept of something like MVP. She was sleeping under the quilt and reading books. After all, it was raining heavily outside, and hiding under the quilt to read books was such a wonderful feeling. I originally thought I could have such a wonderful day, but then I was suddenly pulled up by my sister to attack. She had no idea about the Admiral's promise or about MVP. "It's you who have been appointed. Then let me say a few words." "Shut up." Bazai didn't care. Saratoga said, "Bazai, you don't want the MVP, then give me the results." "Why give it to you?" "Because." Before Saratoga could speak, Lexington appeared behind her and held her head. Saratoga looked at her sister and felt like crying. Bazai said, "Oh, I am the MVP, that's it, then we win, it's time to go home." Saratoga complained to her sister, "They are acting like gangsters." In fact, after Saratoga opened, it did not continue to fly carrier-based aircraft. After all, there was no way. It was already afternoon when the attack was launched, and the dense dark clouds, heavy rain, and dim light had a considerable impact on the carrier-based aircraft. Compared with a battleship using a little light, it doesn't matter what it blasts with one cannon. Or they could just rush forward and crush those small destroyers into slag with their huge tonnage. In comparison, it has to be said that night is really the biggest enemy of the aircraft carrier. However, whether Bismarck is still the Prince of Wales does not actually have many results. After all, during the opening ceremony, he faced densely packed enemies. In any case, there will be much less prey later, no matter how much Bismarck and the Prince of Wales can hunt. However, the so-called deep-sea flagship appeared later. It was a deep-sea flagship. Whoever defeated it would be able to get certificates and medals even at the Ship Girl headquarters. Although no one is interested in certificates or medals, they are also important indicators for MVP. It's Bazai. I also think it should be Bazai. Only Bazai is confused. What is the use of MVP? Can it be exchanged for food? Seeing that the matter was irreversible at this time, Saratoga frowned and continued to insist that this was not an option. After thinking about it, she waved to everyone, then pretended to be angry and said, "Since you are like this, I will leave first. I have something to do and I will leave first. You can clean up the battlefield yourself." She looked unhappy. Lexington said, "Gaga. Sister, you can clean up the trophies, I'm leaving." The mountain man has his own clever plan. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Looking for the Lost Ship Girl. Author, Hai De Rong Yan. Chapter 259. In the eyes of everyone, the girl Saratoga left early out of anger, but just be angry, it doesn't matter. Anyway, at this time, a person will not be in danger if he goes back alone. After all, even Deep-Sea Yamato has been defeated. And with the character of this young girl Saratoga, there really won't be any big problems with her being full of ghosts and spirits. On the contrary, we need to be on guard against her causing any big problems. But what she said when she left reminded everyone that after such a battle, you still have to reap the spoils. The only pity is that Yamato Fukumi's departure is ultimately difficult to resist. But just like in the past, if you want to defeat the deep-sea flagship, it will not take one battle after all. Being able to fight like this is enough for everyone. MVP landed on Bazai's head in a daze, but looking at Bazai's confused look, it seemed like he didn't know anything. At this time, due to the departure of Yamato Fukumi, the dark clouds in the sky gradually dispersed. It's just that it was already afternoon when the war started. Although all the dark clouds have dispersed now, the sky is still dark, and only a faint light can be seen. Saratoga left in anger, and Nelson came over at this time. But there were people here that she was not familiar with, so after seeing Yamato Fukumai defeated, she waited for Zeppelin and York City to come over, and then went there together. At this time, everyone had just defeated the deep-sea ship girl, so naturally they would not put away all the ship's equipment. So when Nelson walked over and took a look, whether it was the Bismarck's ship uniform, the Bizai's ship uniform, or the Prince of Wales and counterattack ship uniforms, that equipment looked really gorgeous to Nelson. It's no wonder that it can give people with heavy armor. The deep sea brings harm to Yamato. Nelson looked around. She was also a decisive person and didn't like to be coy. At this time, she said, "Hello, why was Yamato Fukumai alone when he showed up?" Lexington had also been to the academy and recognized Nelson. He said at this time, before Yamato Abyss appeared, we had eliminated a large number of enemies. The enemy, but not seen at all. Because it's all sunk. Nelson said, but there are so many, why so fast? I just saw that scene. Yamato Fukumai, who had made him suffer so much, was actually defeated like this. If someone had told me something like this earlier, that a large fleet in the deep sea could be wiped out with just one fleet, they would probably have scoffed at it. But at this time, seeing Yamato Fukumai defeated with his own eyes, I had to believe this. Counterattack also walked up to Nelson at this time, and the opponent's ship uniform had also been opened. She looked at it and asked, "Are you Nelson?" I also know a Nelson. She dresses like a one-eyed dragon. Sometimes she wants to be weird, and then she says she is Victory and she is my good friend. I counterattack, she is the Prince of Wales. Firefly also saw Nelson. She raised her head and said, "I know a Nelson who can sail at 29 knots. Nelson was surprised. As a low-speed battleship, there is no Nelson at 29 knots. Don't listen to her," he countered. After such a conversation, the counterattack actually brought a lot of goodwill to Nelson, making people feel familiar in spite of themselves. Nelson looked at Bismarck and remembered that Bismarck used to be a shipgirl mercenary called the Black Ghost. He hesitated and said, "Are you mercenaries?" "We are not, we are the Admiral's shipgirls, and I am the master's maid." Counterattack has always believed that being a maid is something to be proud of. "Admiral, who is it?" "I don't know you as an instructor." Nelson knew the surrounding garrison and admirals well. "I have never heard of any admiral having such a ship girl. After all, if there is such a powerful ship girl, it is impossible for her to remain unknown." Zeppelin patted Nelson on the shoulder and said, "The admiral they are talking about is Sugu, your student." Nelson said in surprise, "That Sugu? But he is a newcomer." He countered, "We are his ship girls, always have been." Having just witnessed such a battle, Nelson really couldn't put on his airs as an academy instructor in front of everyone. He wanted to say something at this time, but he hesitated. Looking around, there are some unknown ship girls. They have just experienced the battle and their momentum has not yet calmed down. At this time, they suddenly found that everyone was stronger than themselves. Of course, those small ships were excluded from the beginning. Among these people, the most familiar ones are of course Zeppelin and Yorktown, and then there is Bismarck, who had a chance to compete. He was very pleased with the counterattack he had just spoken to. At this moment, his eyes turned around, and he suddenly realized that someone seemed to be missing. Nelson thought for a while and asked, "Where is Akage? Why didn't you see her?" While everyone was talking, she didn't see Akage. It was supposed that Akage should be here. After all, Akage wanted to leave with the students. Although ordinary students didn't know it, as an instructor, Akage's departure caused a lot of fuss. Because of Nelson's reminder, Everyone noticed that Akage was not seen, and she remained silent. At this time, I looked to the side and saw Akage squatting in the distance. York City took the lead in sailing over and shouted, "Sister Akage, what's going on?" Akage turned his head and saw York City, smiled, stretched out his finger and pointed forward. York City looked over, and there was a little girl there with a cute face and long blue hair tied into a long side ponytail. York City had never seen such a scene before. Looking at the girl sitting on the sea, she looked like she was asleep. Because of Yamato Fukumai's retreat, the sea surface became calm, and ripples rippled around her. She closed her eyes and had a smile on her face, as if she was dreaming. Is this the ship girl who woke up from the shackles of the deep sea after the war? Ship girl. Yes. York City said in surprise, have we salvaged the boat? It should be said that she escaped from the shackles of the deep sea and has now awakened as a ship girl. She looks very cute. York City stretched out his hand to touch it and looked at the little girl. Could that be the new ship girl who would join the town after him? Although there were many ship girls who joined the garrison in the past, they were all children whom the admiral knew before, and he was the only newcomer, so now it seems that there are newcomers who are newer than him. Akage put his finger to his lips and said, "Shh, don't pinch her face. She is sleeping. You have learned bad things from the admiral. Don't pinch me. I'm not that guy. I'll touch you at most." As long as she is not eating, Akage is an absolutely dignified classical lady. At this time, they had experienced a fierce battle, but there was no trace of embarrassment. Akage said, "As a deep-sea ship girl, I am always surrounded by memories of pain and hatred. If she becomes a ship girl now, she will definitely have a sweet dream." York City said, "I never had a sweet dream when I woke up." Although he kicked his admiral as soon as he woke up. "You must have had a very brave dream. Just like you are now, brave and fearless." York City laughed somewhat innocently, stretched out his hand to grab his short golden hair, and said, "Sister Akage, don't praise me like that." The two of them were talking, and then more and more people came over. "Who is she?" "Have no idea." Akage said, "I don't know the kid, but I feel very close to him." Baizai laughed and said, "Trophy." Then she was stared at by Bismarck, saying that the ship girl is a trophy is not nice. After waiting like this for a while, the little girl woke up and Akage squatted in front of her. "Hello, who are you?" The little girl rubbed her eyes and looked at the people around her. She was not as scared as an ordinary little girl. Instead, she saw happy expressions on everyone's faces. "My name is Irashi, Destroyer Irashi. Looking for the lost ship girl." Author, Haide Rong Yan. Chapter 260. As an instructor at the academy and as a ship's wife, Nelson was not afraid of artillery fire and had already taken the lead to inform Sugu, who was still a new admiral. In the past, he was an admiral, and now he is a teacher teaching students in the academy, but Lindy is still just an ordinary person, and in many cases is unable to play the role of a ship girl. However, each has their own role, and her role is to arrange Tianhao and Kaohsiung to the joint war room in the local county. When they passed by, some people had gathered in the war room. In addition to the admiral, there are actually instructors or teachers from the college gathered here. As more and more people come, the pressure on people increases. More and more people and more information are coming together. No one has very accurate information, but because people gather together to speculate and gossip, without accurate information, there are many confusing theories. Someone gathered together and talked, "I heard that it is a large fleet in the deep sea, and a deep sea flagship appears. Fukumai Yamato. It's a bit difficult." "Don't say that, it's alarmist. The ship girl headquarters will send someone over, I just don't know who it is." "Is Enterprise still Missouri?" "You guys are being funny, the ship girl headquarters mainly looks at seniority. If we only look at the ship uniform, otherwise our Academy president, Jean, would not be qualified to be the Academy principal. No matter how powerful the ship uniform is, as an official, you still need to have a clear mind. To be clear-minded, I once saw a Soviet Union at the ship's headquarters. The Soviet Union is also a very powerful battleship. I saw her holding aviation gasoline and saying to the people around her, "Hi, comrade, vodka." So I said no matter how powerful the battleship is, a clear mind is the most important thing. People like this cannot be high-ranking officials. Such small talk diluted some of the tense and solemn atmosphere. At the door of the war room, Linda looked at the rain curtain outside and looked into the distance. He could still vaguely see the light of the fire. At this time, her colleague came over, saw her and said, "What? Are you worried about Nelson?" "Of course I'm worried about her. She is very powerful, ranked at the top in the academy. It's just that she's too powerful. I'm afraid that she might want to rush in on a whim. There's no point worrying." Yes. Lindy had some doubts about Nelson. Among the many instructors in the academy, if it is Zeppelin, the academy's aircraft carrier instructor, then he is absolutely reliable. If it were Nelson, he might follow the fleet and fight Fukakai Yamato at this time. The ship girls there are indeed very strong, but neither Zeppelin, Akagi, nor York City can fight at night. I stood at the door and thought for a long time, watching the heavy rain hitting the leaves. There was a dog in the field of vision hiding from the rain under a tree. She was not overflowing with love and wanted to go and help. There are obviously eaves next to it, but you still have to hide under the tree. What a silly dog, she thought. But even though my own affairs have been taken care of, I am still worried about Nelson. What a fool. Then looking at the silly dog under the tree and shaking the cat, Lindy and the people around him said, "Find me a car and I'll go over and have a look. It's been a while since Nelson set off." I don't know why there's still a car there. There was fire, and it still looked like it was going back and forth. Nelson walked over by water. At this time, it was a bit dangerous for Lindy, an ordinary person, to walk by water. There are 2 roads from the county seat to the governor's office there. Generally speaking, the waterway is naturally much more convenient. The land road is really bumpy, muddy, and narrow. But this is not the time to pay attention to this. No matter how powerful the bombardment of the deep-sea battleship is, it will not go down such a path. The land route is much safer and less dangerous. Then take a look at it from a distance. If everything is fine, that's fine. If the garrison has turned into ruins, then I'm sorry and won't go to that muddy water. Saratoga left early alone. At this time, due to the deep sea and the sinking, the heavy rain became lighter and lighter. She doesn't care what happens over there. Since she can't win the MVP, she has to do her own thing. She has always done things as she pleased, just like she skipped classes when she was in school, or she always gave the blame to her sister when she did something wrong. Dressed in ship uniform, with only the flight deck stowed away, she was sailing alone on the sea. She raised her head and looked at the sky. She actually had an idea at the beginning of the matter, but later because of the promise, the idea was forgotten. Yes, it doesn't matter what the MVP is, as long as you flop a little, that's what you thought from the beginning. Think about it, this attack went smoothly and no one was injured, but it is reasonable that someone was injured. Moreover, how can my brother-in-law tell whether we are injured or not? You probably can't tell, as long as I don't unfold the ship's suit. Leaving alone, Saratoga increased the speed to the maximum, thinking that at least it would be earlier than when her sisters and others came back. If I had known earlier, I would have just left a deep-sea destroyer or something, because I was having too much fun. With one hand pinching the little finger of her other hand, Saratoga shook her head. However, flopping is not easy to operate, and even if the deep-sea destroyer is left, it is not a flop but a real fall. With so many people watching around, it will be very difficult to operate. After thinking about it, I feel like I have a headache. Why do I care so much? We are about to go to the Tutelary residence. Soon after, Saratoga sailed to the garrison alone and stood by the flower garden inside the garrison. She lingered for a moment, then threw herself to the ground. Then she sat down on the ground and thought, I fell anyway, and asked my brother-in-law to help me fill the bath water. Yes, if I go back alone first, I will definitely be able to ask him for help. By the way, tear up the clothes a little more, it looks a lot more like this. My hair had already become wet due to the heavy rain. At this time, it became a little messy and awkward because of the sticky leaves and muddy water, and my clothes were also a little damaged. It's just, she doesn't look like she was injured in the battle, she just fell somewhere. If you are just fantasizing here, you will probably laugh at you. You can only cheat in the shower, but you can't dive at all. The heavy rain fell, hitting the leaves with a rustling sound. Sugu stood by the window of the office, trying to look through the heavy rain to the sea. However, in the dense rain curtain, as an ordinary person, his visible sight distance was only a few meters away, and he could barely see the branches swaying in the wind outside the window. In the office, Xiaozai and U-47, who had short pink hair and wore a hoodie, a green skirt, stockings, and boots, drew squares on a piece of paper. Then they each held a pencil, and then they drew squares on the paper. Played backgammon. You hit me, and as U-47 said, I made the wrong move. She wanted to use an eraser to erase the circles she had just filled in on the paper. Xiaozai reached out and patted it on the paper. Then Xiaozai said, U-47, you can't regret your move, you're a good player, so you lost. Now it's U-505. Xiaozai plays this kind of game the most. She often played it when she and Sugu lived together. After all, it was usually boring. At this time, she is naturally better than U-47. U-505 smiled and pushed U-47 away, and then challenged Xiaozai. However, she was very confident, but she failed quickly. After a series of battles, Xiaozai looked at Sugu, the real backgammon devil, and she said, Admiral, come and play. Sugu turned his head at the window and said, shall I play? Your sister is fighting outside, and you are playing backgammon here. It's too heartless. Xiaozai retorted, in the past, when everyone attacked, you were not doing your own thing, but now you actually accuse us. Before. It is a game after all, and as long as there is no attack, nothing will happen. But it's different now. This is a world. Although we are still very confident that we can defeat the deep-sea ship girl, we are still afraid of accidents. After all, everyone has feelings now. Sugu was worried, but Xiaozai was not worried at all, and said, Sister Miao will never lose. You really have confidence in your cat sister. But no matter what, Sugu would not play backgammon as carelessly as Xiaozai. He looked at the rain curtain, not caring whether it was useful or not. Then, at this moment, he suddenly found that someone had pulled his trouser leg, lowered his head, and then he saw U-81 holding his little wolf. U-81 said, Admiral, let us go out, let's go take a look. Bismarck did not take the submarine out because he was worried that the submarine would be in danger. Although they are not afraid of big ships like deep-sea battleships, they are afraid of anti-submarine ships like deep-sea destroyers. Because of its thin skin, if it was really attacked by a deep bomb, it might sink in an instant. Compared to the heartless otaku, U-81, which is worried about itself, is really great. Sugu reached out and rubbed U-81's head, comforting him and saying, I'm not worried. As soon as Sugu finished speaking, Xiaozai pointed at Sugu and said, the Admiral really has no conscience. Sugu immediately clenched his fists and said, I think you need to take care of yourself. Xiaozai deliberately pretended to hold his head and squat in defense, shouting, "The admiral is beating someone." Such a conversation diluted the worried atmosphere, and Sugu then walked away from the window, trusting his ship girl. At this time there was another sound. "Really, Admiral, it doesn't matter, everyone must be fine." This was Sigsby's voice. Sigsby, Sullivan, and Thatcher also stayed here, their sister Fletcher having gone out, so they had no one to look after them, so they came here. Compared to Sugu, they have no worries about their sister. I had launched many attacks in the past, and I was really worried at first. Although there were times when the enemy came back, I never heard that anyone in the garrison had sunk. Since they have never experienced the sinking of their friends, they have no feeling of sinking. Moreover, there are so many people going out this time, so they are not worried at all. Admiral, there is really no need to worry. We will retreat when necessary. Unexpectedly being comforted by the little girl, Sugu said, "I know. You look anxious. Then what's the point of not being anxious?" Sigsby touched his face and said, "Admiral, let's play truth or dare." This little girl had the most clever ideas, but Sugu decisively refused. "If you don't play, don't play." Sigsby tugged at Sugu's sleeve and said, "Admiral, squat down." Then Sugu bent down slightly, and Sigsby came close to his ears, stretched out his hands to cover his ears, blew a breath, and said, "The most handsome admiral is the one who anxiously waits for his ship girl to come back." Sugu looked at the smiling little beauty destroyer Sigsby. She had ice blue hair and a beautiful lace headband on her head. He touched his ears and thought to himself, "This little girl is really amazing, a little vixen. If she grows up, she will be even better." The office is on the second floor of a complex building, and San Juan, Leipzig, and Exeter stand in the corridor outside the dormitory. They looked at the rain curtain. Compared to Sugu and the others, they had a much better view in the heavy rain. They were not worried, because the ship girl knew the ship girl, and they knew how powerful Bismarck and everyone else was. Wearing a brown windbreaker, he looked like he was afraid of the cold. In fact, it's not too cold these days, but the reason why I wear a windbreaker is because it is expensive. At this time, Leipzig said, "By destroying such a deep-sea fleet, our garrison can get a lot of money." San Juan said, "You always think about money, Exeter, you need to consult with Leipzig." Exeter was not wearing a nun's uniform. She stretched out her arms to catch the raindrops falling from the eaves, and said, "Giving money is a natural thing. She is not a virgin. On the contrary, she has a very upright view of what is right and what is wrong. Very clear." Leipzig looked at the pink-haired San Juan and said, "You are the strange one, you don't even want the money. I heard that you met the admiral before and paid him a large sum of money, but the hard-earned money actually, if you give me this, you really want to support the admiral. The three of them are all the most ordinary ship girls in the town, so there is no reason for anyone to be afraid of the other." San Juan pursed his lips and said, "I want to tear your mouth open, Grandette Leipzig." While they were talking like this, they suddenly saw a person walking out of the rain. It was a somewhat embarrassed Saratoga. Saratoga held one hand sideways, holding her chest and grabbing the other hand, as if her arm was injured. In fact, except for the muddy water and torn clothes, she was fine. Her skin was smooth and there were no scratches at all. At this time, Saratoga also saw a few people, raised his head and said, "Where is the admiral?" "In the office." "Oh." San Juan asked, "Where are they?" "Behind." Then in the office, Sugu saw the girl Saratoga and asked quickly, "What's wrong with you?" "I fell. It was indeed a fall. I didn't say that I was injured in the battle. You can figure out the rest by yourself." "Where are your sisters and the others?" "We won. They have nothing to do. I just rushed back early, brother-in-law, put the bath water in for me. I want to take a bath." "Well.